Oh, geez.
I'm not going to remind you what it is.
You got this.
This is the Pod Band Pipecast, the home of the best pipe band podcast in the world. Is that close enough?
That's close enough.
It's good. It's good. Acceptable answer.
Acceptable. Yeah. Welcome back to Podband Pipecast. I say welcome back because you obviously listened to last week's episode, and if you didn't, why are you here? Go back there and listen to that, and then come back here.
You need the lore.
The lore and the character development. Alasdair told us his life story, and I promise that's more interesting than I make it sound.
You think it doesn't sound
really
interesting?
dark. It got really dark in places, right?
Well, because sometimes you say, oh, this person told me their life story, and it's just like, I didn't need to know their life story because their life story isn't interesting.
Oh,
But
well.
I don't know. I always think that. I'm a very much an introverted person, and I've definitely had those moments of like I'm at the grocery store and some person just comes up to me and starts talking to me, and I'm just like, what? Please,
Let's go away.
Yeah, yes. Agreed.
But interesting people only on our podcast. So,
wow.
So you go back and listen to it. It'll be good. So, yes, we're here with Alasdair Martin again, and we're going to talk about math. And once again, that's going to be a heck of a lot more interesting than you anticipate if you don't like math, because it's going to be fun. It's going to be about piping, and it's going to be great.
It's going to be a fun time.
It's going to be a fun time. But first of all, why are we talking to Alasdair about math? Question number one for you, sir. Do you enjoy math, and why or why not?
Oh, man. Yeah, sure. So you always have that person who said, I love math. And I'm like, well, I don't like math that much. It's a neat tool, and it's an interesting tool. It definitely changes the way you think about problems in the universe, I suppose. Well, that sounded really deep, didn't it? Not really. Yeah, I enjoy it. It can be mentally stimulating in a way, and it has sort of adjusted the way that my brain works. So, to it, not saying I'm a logical person, but I try to approach things more logically than, I guess, heuristically. If I don't know the answer to something, I'll try to break it up into little chunks and break into little pieces and try to answer the question from there. So I do like math. In fact, so I think the furthest I ever got in mathematics was I have a bachelor's in science in mathematics. So I started college as a communications major, and I ended it as an econ math major. So it kind of went from business oriented all the way to the opposite end of the spectrum. It's like, well, this is getting a little too theoretical, but it's more interesting than business communication, I suppose. To me, more interesting than business communication to me. Obviously, I'm not a very good communicator, so it makes sense why I'd be drawn to shut me in a room and write proofs to things that say if then on it and try to prove them true or false.
So you like math better than you like other things?
Yeah.
Some other things.
That's right. Yep. I wish I had gone to grad school 2 years later, just because if I could do it all over again, that's another Genesis reference, isn't it? Do it again. Never mind. I'm getting off track. I'm listening to too much Genesis lately, if you couldn't tell. But if I could do it again, I would have gone to grad school for mathematics, because I think that's it. My, like, scholastically, education wise, my heart rested with math, not so much with the econ side of it, and that's what I did my master's/PhD in.
Well, there's always time to go back if you really want to.
Yep.
And maybe you'll have so much fun doing math on this episode that you'll want to write a thesis about bagpipe math.
Oh yeah.
I don't know. Could happen.
Good.
Maybe. Definitely. I think you could actually write a thesis on this problem. It's an interesting question.
Well, make sure you thank us in your graduation speech when you return.
The Pod Band Pipecast for my reinvigoration of my interest in mathematics.
So yeah, we asked you if you could calculate how many different bagpipe tunes are possible. Where do we start with answering that, and why?
Okay. Well, I guess I have a little presentation.
Ooh.
Ooh.
By the way, while you're getting that ready, for our listeners, thank you for listening, as always, because you always listen and we appreciate you. For people who are watching, thank you for watching. And if you're listening and wish you were watching and wonder how you could watch, because I can already tell this presentation is
It's beautiful.
It's gorgeous. If you would like to watch this and all of our other episodes, join us on patreon.com/podbandpipecast, where for the low price of $5
Plus tax
per month, you can watch this and all of our other episodes. And this is going to be, we're going to talk through it, of course. So if you're listening, keep listening. But just keep in mind, there's a presentation and looks like a screenshot from Seinfeld. So
A+, 10 out of 10.
already 10 out of 10.
Alex, if we could have the bass line for the Seinfeld opening.
Yeah, right now.
All right. Yeah. So I just wrote this title, and as I wrote it, I read it in Jerry Seinfeld's voice. Hence why we have Jerry joining us today. But
You
yeah,
only got 9 notes. How many tunes are there?
These notes. How many tunes are there? Yep. All right. So, yeah. So stop me for questions at any point or anything, or call me out on my dishonest mathematics. Call me out there as well. But yeah. So I think a few weeks ago, y'all. Well, in the podcast with Angus, y'all. That's my new North Carolina vernacular coming out. Y'all talked about, asked how many tunes are there, and then you guys thought I might be able to answer that. So I hope that this answer is sufficient. I think by the end we'll realize it's insufficient, but it's pretty interesting to think about. So let's run through this. So how many tunes are there? All right, yeah. So before I forget, I luckily have a student, Brian Somerville, who he is. Our lessons are often pretty fun because they kind of span all the way from like topological theory to optimization theory, and we like to say that we are the mathnasium of bagpipes.
TM.
So thank you, Brian. He's very engineering oriented mindset, very interesting fella. Brian with Y. So thank you, Brian, for brainstorming this with me. So if this is wrong, we could also blame Brian. So
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Brian. Brian.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Brian.
Yeah. All right. So I think when you guys asked me about this initially, I thought that's a really tough question because there's so many different idioms and all this stuff. So I thought, instead of answering this for all pipe tunes, why don't we take, to me, I think, I mean, at first glance, you'll say 6/8 marches are not, they're pretty tough. But the reason I'm thinking if we answer this for 6/8 marches, this will maybe provide a nice avenue to approach other tune types. Because I think, in my opinion, 6/8 marches there's not many that are really out there that are unorthodox. They haven't really been taken in strange directions. You don't hear like Inverarian District or some of the other grade 1 bands taking a 6/8 march and just playing a really, really wacky rendition of it. You don't really hear that. You hear more like hornpipes, reels, strats, bays, even 2/4 marches, especially in hornpipes. You'll hear some pretty wild variations on that. But what a 6/8 march is, I think, is pretty well defined. Whereas all the other idioms aren't as well defined as a 6/8 march. So an orthodox, I'm calling them an orthodox, which I would say is like 99.9% of all 6/8 marches, are pretty straightforward. They have 2 or 4 parts. They really only have 4 unique rhythmic patterns, which probably also applies to most other compound time marches, like 9/8 marches, 12/8 marches. If you feel like taking colon bay and turning it into a 15/8, it's not going to be much different. But 6/8s are pretty straightforward. So we're just going to take 6/8s and run with that. Maybe create a proof of concept for other smarter folks to really jump on this problem and actually answer this question once and for all. Yeah, so let's first off, any controversy there?
Yeah, I think that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
By the way, if you're listening to this and you're, harkens back to the episode we did where it was all about actually, just sure, tell us actually. We'd love to hear your opinion if you think you have a better way of approaching this, because this is a thing. It's a thing. So before we go on, could you what do you identify as rhythmic patterns? Could you explain that?
There we go.
Oh, how did I know you were going to say that?
To me, and maybe I'm wrong here, this is where you do the actually, but the 4 rhythmic patterns are kind of dotted quarter. So when we're talking about, so here's an example of Athol Highlander starts with a big dotted quarter. That big E doubling in the beginning, dotted quarter. And we actually heard another rhythmic pattern, the very last one, dot cut norm, I'm calling it, dot cut norm triplet pattern, which that 4th one is probably the most common. So for you listening, you've got to pay in to see what I'm talking about when I say 4th. So that's to me, that's the most common. And then the dotted quarter, then that quarter 8th note complex. And then the cut dot normal. So when talking about Athol Highlanders again, when you get to that end phrase, back to Athol Highlanders has a good example of 1, 3, and 4. I don't think it has a good example of 2. There's another 6/8 that I play that has a lot of those quarter 8ths in it. Those E quarter D 8ths. But you're not really going to find any real rhythmic pattern beyond these 4 in the pipe music. I'm not going to talk about drumming. In the words of David Bowie in Fire Walk With Me, we're not talking about drumming. Except he said Judy, not drumming, but it works. It works. Trust me, it works.
Same thing.
Why do I say trust? Yeah. All right. So those are the 4 rhythmic patterns.
So 4 rhythmic patterns being dotted quarter note is 1, or quarter note 8th note, or 16th note, dotted 8th note, or dotted 8th note, 16th note, 8th note. Right.
Exactly.
I almost forgot what a 16th note was called for a second. It's been a while.
2 flaggy thing. 2.
All right.
All right. Okay, so my experience of math was not really in the combinatorics, counting, discrete math side of things. I was more of the weird theoretical continuous mathematics side of things. So probably I'm the wrong man for the job here, but any sort of math problem I think requires restrictions, assumptions, and good definitions. Or else you're not going to have a really well-defined problem. So really you need to start with a well-defined problem. Which at this point, I'm not even sure if we can say that. And we'll get to that a lot later. Say like, I think we'll see the problem that arises because we don't necessarily have a well-defined problem here. But I'm imposing 4 rules to start with. First rule is that only melody matters. So we're concerned more with what makes a tune. I would say the melody of the tune makes the tune more than the embellishments. The embellishments are exactly that, they're embellishments. I had fun on St. Patrick's Day while we were marching around playing Rowan Tree with a bunch of different variety of embellishments, but the Rowan Tree is the Rowan Tree regardless of what you're playing with it, in my opinion. If you don't play it with embellishments, oh, I started with a grace note, sorry. That's still a Rowan Tree. With the usual embellishments, that's Rowan Tree. If you played grips everywhere, it's still Rowan Tree. That's still the Rowan Tree. A weird version of it, but so only melody matters. And that really, I think, the actually crowd, I think, will point to this first. I'm building a straw man here, but the actually crowd will probably point to this and say, well, actually, you can
actually
embellishments.
Actually, that's not Rowan Tree.
That's barely a tune, actually. Never play that. We will never speak of this again. You shall never go there. All right. Second ground rule. We're only talking orthodox notes. Again, I like this orthodox terminology. So we're not talking C naturals. We're not talking F naturals, nor are we talking G sharps, which are a thing, I think. We're not talking about those. And again, in the immortal words of David Bowie, we're not talking about Judy. I'm just not talking about it.
Judy.
Yep. Orthodox rhythms. So we're only considering the 4 that we mentioned. We're not going to, there might be some wild 6/8 marches that people might start coming up with, but are those 6/8 marches anymore? Those 4 rhythmic patterns have become so ingrained in the 6/8 march zeitgeist. Is it even a 6/8 march if it has something beyond those? Actually, the answer is probably yes, but I'll just say that's beyond the scope of my abilities. And then the orthodox part structure. This is another great thing about 6/8 marches. With 9/8 marches, you tend to find a bit more variety in like even 3/4 marches, 2/4 marches, 4/4 marches. You're going to find more variety in terms of the number of, I mean, lock inside is a 3/4 march, 3 parts. There's a few 2/4 marches. I can't think of their names at the moment that have 3 parts, but we're only really talking about 2 to 4 parts. I haven't heard a 6-parted 2/4 march. Oh, sorry, I played 6-parted 2/4 marches. I've never heard of a 6-parted 6/8 march. So we're talking 2 to 4 parts, each with 16 barred parts. So these are the initial ground rules that we are talking here.
Yeah.
So in piping, we kind of count compound time tunes in like 3/8 beats. So simple time is quarter notes. Compound time, we tend to count in 3/8 note beats. So there, for every 3/8 note, so for every beat hereafter, we're talking about these 4 different combinations. So how many, I have it written here, but how many with the dotted quarter notes, so the 3/8 note, how many possibilities on each of those beats do you have? You have 9 notes. So there's 9 possibilities for every beat. All right. Second problem, quarter eighth. Well, in this case, we have 9 notes and then 9 notes after that. Because, I mean, again, this is the, well, actually, is it, I'm kind of assuming that if you're going to have 2 D notes in a row, you're putting a grace note between them. So that'd be a case where you're on the same note, but it's a quarter eighth. So in some, again, this is probably me being a little dishonest with the math. But I'm assuming that you put an embellishment there if you're going to write it like that. But the embellishment that's there doesn't matter. So, okay. So
that makes sense. Yeah.
So in that case, you have 81 possibilities. So 9 by 9, you have 9 notes, and for every 9 notes, you can have 9 notes after that. So that's 81 possibilities. So for every beat, as a quarter eighth, it's 81. So the fun ones. In the cut dot normal and the dot cut normal, there are 9 by 9 by 9 possibilities. And again, the same case. Well, what if you're all on the same note? Well, it's a GDE then, or something like that. It's just going to be a GDE or something like that, something equivalent. If you can't play GDEs, it'll be something else.
Imagine a whole tune of that. Oh,
let's not.
We're accounting for here.
It's technically a tune, right?
Yeah.
In the Greek thing, there's only, like, if all of them are the dot cut dot, there's only 9 tunes like that.
Dang.
Isn't that exciting? So you don't really have to worry about hearing it. Well, we're not talking probability. We'll get to probability. Again, in the words of David Bowie, we're not talking probability. All right.
Hold on. Is that just like toast? There was a picture of toast on the last slide, and I was just...
Oh, yeah. Yep. There's a picture of bread and butter.
Oh, everything. Okay, 3/8. No,
So this
okay,
is our,
I gotcha.
This is our bread and butter.
This is our bread and butter. Okay, I gotcha. All right.
Yeah. So, all right. So for every beat, there's a dotted quarter, a quarter eighth, a dot cut norm, and a cut dot norm rhythmic pattern. So on every beat, there's actually 1,548 different combinations of notes for every beat. So in other words, this is about to get out of control.
Oh, no.
And here's a number to keep in mind. The Googleplex is 10 to the 100th power. So 10, 100 times.
This is about to get out of control.
Oh, God.
Oh, God.
About to get freaky. All right. So let's get nuts. So there are 2 kinds of states. You have the 2-parters and the 4-parters. So each part has 16 bars with 2 3/8 note beats. So 4-parted tunes have 64 bars. 2-parted tunes have 32. So when you take into account that every beat has 1,548 possibilities, when you're taking a 4-parted tune of 4 bits 16, it's 1,548.
Hold on, wait.
Which I found.
You're getting a little choppy, and we don't want to miss any of the numbers.
I don't want to miss the math.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, I don't know if that's your connection or mine. Let me check real quick.
Yeah, we're starting to get a storm out yonder. It might be the GIF is doing it. The GIF is causing.
Could be the GIF. Okay. Okay, yeah. Let's just go back from 4-parted tunes have 64 bars.
All right. Yeah. 4-parted tunes have 64 bars, whereas 2-parted tunes have 32. I hope I did the math right there. I think so.
Yeah, because 6, 8, 8, 8, 8, yeah.
These are the points where This is where that gets ruined. Is it's not hard, it's in the easy accounting part. This is all accounting, as my old professors used to say. But they're about 1,548 to the 128th power, 4-parted 6/8, which is beyond Excel's computational ability. So it's if I were to make an estimate, it's a bit more than 10 to the 400. So a lot more than a Googleplex. It's not twice as much. It's way more than twice as much because we're talking it's exponentially larger. Power is a lot. It's like the power is 4 times larger. So when we're talking 2-parted tunes, we have 1,548 to the 64th power, which is about 13.97 times 10 to the 2 power, which is, and it's not twice as large as a Googleplex. It's about twice as large as power is still just twice as large because at this point, this is well beyond human comprehension.
Okay, so just to make sure, following along here. So each part has 16 bars with 2 3/8 notes or rhythmic patterns. So 4-parted tunes have 64 bars and 2-parted tunes have 32. That makes sense. 4 parts is twice as many as 2 parts.
Yes.
So yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot of tunes.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of tunes.
Yep. How, ever. You might say, that's really stupid. In which case, I would agree. It is stupid because going back to reality. So Athol Highlanders, let's take Athol Highlanders, for example. So I know this is a 2-parted tune. And I think a lot of folks know this as a 2-parted tune, but a lot of folks also play it as a 4-parted tune. But if you ask both of those people, both would say, that's Athol Highlanders. Neither of those are different tunes. So when you really get to thinking, most pipe tunes that are 4-parted are 2-parted tunes, and the 3rd and 4th parts are like riffing on the first 2 parts. So is it even valid to I know they're different notes, and you can create, are we talking about tunes or are we talking about arrangements? Mm-hmm. And I think we're more talking about tunes than we are arrangements. You could have, many tunes could have thousands upon, well, you've seen the number. If you take, like, any tune has like an incredible, like a huge amount of different arrangements, but it's still the same tune. Moreover, so that's the first reason why what we just did was stupid. The second reason why that was stupid was because most Orthodox 6/8 marches and most pipe tunes have repeating parts. So when we say that a 2-parted tune has 64 beats and 32 bars, it's actually half of that. It's really just 16 unique bars. So we're really talking about 32 bars. So I don't think we need to consider 4-parted tunes. I think we only need to consider the first 2 parts. And anything, it's almost like we're creating equivalence classes of tunes. Tunes can have multiple arrangements, but it's still fundamentally the same tune. If I walked up to you with the first 2 parts and said, I played Athol Highlanders, but then the 3rd and 4th parts were different, but the first 2 parts were exactly the same, you're probably going to say, that's just Athol Highlanders.
With extra steps.
Extra steps, exactly. So we're only considering, I think we should only consider 2-parted tunes. We should only consider repeating parts. Most pipe tunes have common end phrases, especially 6/8 marches. Most of them have common end phrases. And if they differ, it's in the third and fourth parts. Most of the first two parts almost always have that same end phrase. I don't know why I had that last note there. I think I had an idea, but it's kind of half-baked. We'll get to that. So let's move on. So we're going to add additional restrictions to the 4 we already have. We're going to have a bass melody restriction. So bass melody is your first 2 parts. Anything beyond that is an arrangement. Repeating parts restriction. This is going to half the number of beats per part, which is good. And we're going to have an end phrase restriction. So it's going to be the same in parts 1 and 2. So now we're holding 4 of those beats, regardless of the notes that come before it, we're holding those notes the same. So if it's one thing in the first part, it's got to be the same in the second part. So there's only one option in that second part. So now we're talking, when we take the bass melody restriction, we're dropping this from 128 to 64. With the repeating parts restriction, we're bringing this down from 64 to 32. And when we take the end phrase restriction, we've dropped the 32 to 28.
Wow.
So the number of beats you need to worry about decreases dramatically. So let's get nuts again. One more time, in the words of the band formerly known as Daft Punk. So we'll take the same mathematics, same arithmetic, 1,548 to the 28th power, which is a much more, stated sarcastically, manageable number, 20.59 times 10 to the 88th, which is less than a googolplex now.
Yay!
Yeah. So for a little bit of context, there's about 10 to the 78 or 10 to the 82nd atoms in the observable universe. That's the estimate.
Wow.
For those who are astronomically inclined, we're about 90.3 times 10 to the 7th miles from the sun. We're about 14.9 times 10 to the 18th miles to Andromeda, which, you know, to make this real, is about 2.5 million light years. And we're about 78.8 times 10 to the 21st miles from the furthest detectable galaxy from us. You may know that as Galaxy GN-Z11, which is about 13.4 billion light years away. Yeah, you guys knew that.
We knew that. We may know that, yeah.
And something a little more abstract than distances and interstellar space, there's about 6.7 times 10 to the 21st possible 9x9 Sudoku grids. So it's a lot. There are a lot of tunes that can be written.
And that's just 6/8.
So you're telling me there's more possible 6/8 than 6/8 bagpipe tunes than there are atoms in the observable universe.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Glad we're on the same page.
Yep. All right. So you may still say, wait, that's really stupid. I still agree with you. This calculation is really stupid. And here's why. And I think this is about as far as I can take it, having not being having a PhD in math. So here are a few complaints you might have. This is a few complaints I have of my own work. So this method it's still going to catch tunes that I would consider identical, that might differ from a handful of notes. So here's a great example from the 2 bands I played in. Hyro de Gerlach. So Mesa's version of Hyro de Gerlach is 1 note different from the band I'm currently in, Loch Normans, and it happens in that end line. So that's the version we played when I played in Mesa. In Loch Norman, it's so 2 tunes that are different by 1 note. Loch Norman has that E, Mesa has that high A in there. but they're still the same tune.
Mm.
This method is going to have a lot of junk in it. It's going to have a lot of tunes, but it's different by one note. So in an effort to reduce that, even with that common end phrase equivalence class, with that common, the common first two parts equivalence class, we're still not catching everything. But here's the thing, where do you make that definition? What separates a tune being different? Like how many notes is it? Like what separates one tune from another? It's not a really well-defined, I don't think it's a really well-defined, it's not a really well-defined definition, because let's jump into 9/8 marches. Take the festival march and the Heights of Dargai. The second part of the festival marches. That's the festival march second part. The Heights of Dargai second part.
Mm.
It's almost 100% exactly the same. Maybe one of the rhythmic patterns are a little different, but those are different tunes. So what separates one tune from another? How do you form these new, to really answer this question, we've got to answer this. We need a good definition for this. What separates one tune from another? What is the boundary line between different tunes? When does one tune stop looking like itself anymore? Like when does High Road to Gerlach? How many notes do I have to change to make High Road to Gerlach not High Road to Gerlach anymore? And another crazy thought is, if I change the key of High Road to Gerlach, is it still High Road to Gerlach? Like you can take Scotland the Brave and play it in, like, what is it? I don't know music theory, but like here's Scotland the Brave. But you could also play it like you're in a different key now, but it's still the same tune, you know. But then again, you have a tune like Ca the Use. And this is probably the most popular version of this sort of concept. And then you have the Brown-Haired Maid. They're both the same tune, they're just in different keys, you know, but they're different. They have different names, but are they different tunes? I don't know. Sorry, this is getting way too philosophical now. But
No, this is interesting.
Yeah, but I think to properly answer this question, you need to get a little philosophical. You have to start. Any good math needs a really good definition, and that is one thing that I don't think we have a good handle on as a piping community. What separates one tune from another? How do we explicitly say this is the definition of a tune, and this is how we separate them from each other? So that's the first complaint. The second complaint is most of these tunes are probably really bad. Many of the tunes are probably going to break like musical theory laws and would probably never be written. But is it fair to remove avant-garde tunes from consideration? And on that note, I really want somebody to play do giant, like Scotland the Brave, but it's giant steps. Somebody needs to do that. I would watch it. Maybe that's a job for Alex. Can you do that for us, Alex? Please do it. Do it. Okay, so that's a first. So we remove avant-garde tunes that have not been written yet? Second rebuttal, this complaint is more probabilistic in nature. We're not talking about how many tunes there are. We're talking about the probability a tune is going to be written, which are two different things. we're still trying to figure out the universe of tunes we even want to consider. That's the next question. If we can answer this question, how many tunes are there? What's the probability that you're going to write a bad tune? That's the next question. But we don't have all the tools to answer that yet.
I mean, I imagine the probability you're going to write a bad tune depends on how bad of a composer you are.
There you go. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, completely agree. Yeah. Sorry,
I derailed your presentation here.
I think that's the that is the point to take. But there's so many, like, if we can't even talk about the combinatorics. How can we talk about the probability? And then with probability, like you said, there's so many other things you have to take into account, like the quality of the writer. This is starting to get into like some wacky statistics, I think. Anyway, but still, I agree. This method was really stupid. Regardless. So what do we come to the conclusion? I think we have a decent starting point. I think it's an overestimate about how many tunes there actually are. What we really need to do is figure out, how do we define what a tune is? How do we separate one tune from another? That's the big question, which I think I only have a BS in math. I think we need somebody with like a PhD to really answer that question, or somebody that's just more mathematically capable. Moreover, I think you need a more competent musician. Like, you need a combination of a really good mathematician and a really good musician to really understand the music and then apply the mathematics to it. And then we'll have the answer to this, the real answer, not this point estimate, this little estimate that we're creating.
Go
ahead.
What you're telling us is you're going to go back to school and get your PhD in math.
And in music.
And in music. You're going to double major, double PhD, math and music, and we're going to answer this question.
Oh, yeah. It's definitely worth the time. Definitely worth it. And I say that only semi-sarcastically. Not 100%. Yeah, exactly. But I'll do that. Let's regroup, as they say, after 10 years. All right. But so, final note. I guess what I'm saying is there's probably a lot of 6/8 notes that you can still write. So get writing, folks. Because if you the number of 6/8 we actually even play. You look at the Scots Guards, you look at all these different books of tunes, they have a bunch of 6/8. And you look at it and you say, don't know why doesn't anyone play that? We only really play like the same 10. Like whenever you're at a Highland Games, you only hear the same 10, so there's probably a lot that can be done. And maybe there's something that some fancy grade 1 band or a really competent musician can do to really innovate this idiom, which would be neat. God knows we have enough hornpipes and reels and jigs. In fact, maybe the place to look at for ideas on how to get like new 6/8 out there is to look at jigs, because there's some really fancy jigs out there now, because people like laying more than 6/8 inches of line. It sells books, as the kids say. So maybe that's where we should look. If we really, again, we're not talking about the number of tunes anymore. We're talking about that there's so many tunes out there that haven't been written. So maybe that's where we look. Anyway, there's a lot of tunes out there. So get writing. Where else? Yeah. Cool. That's about all I had.
Nice. So for those of you that tuned in hoping to learn, maybe you're a piper and you're like, I want to know how many tunes I actually have left to learn. Well, bad news, a lot. Good news, it's a lot of tunes you have to learn. But, could be good news, could be bad news. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a. I mean, technically it exists. We just unveiled that it exists. You know.
Oh, you cut out a
So-
little bit there, but
Oh, yeah, that's all right. I don't think what I said was very important. So there you go. So that's yeah.
yeah. Well, thank you for doing the calculation. That was a lot of.
That was math.
That was some math.
That was some math.
And very, it makes sense. You walked us through all the steps of it. I expected it to be like showing us some graphs and functions that's just like, we don't know what's happening, but it's very logical.
Yeah. As math tends to be, I think.
Yeah, generally.
It's good. Well, I'm glad. I'm glad. There we go.
So people listening at home, did you enjoy the bagpipe math? Are you excited to go learn all of the tunes now?
Do you want Alasdair to go get his PhD in math and music theory? Let us know.
We need to know. You
No,
could
how
decide
many-
his fate.
How many? I guess we could do it based on like if this gets 1,000 views.
If this gets 1,000 views,
Alasdair's going to go back to college.
That
Ugh.
would be
we'll revisit this again in like 10, 20 years, something
Yeah.
like that. I think, honestly, the best way to figure out how many 6/8 marches are possible is to write as many of them as you can. and we did say how many are possible and not how many are good. So,
Yeah.
Exactly.
like we said, the one tune that's just all repeated low A's with maybe some. Yeah,
yeah, that one.
that's
my favorite.
beautiful. Look, we just wrote it.
Done.
Done.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Let us know what you think.
Everyone's favorite subject in school is definitely math.
Yeah. Well, I think when you're an adult, you have a greater appreciation of it. Once you're out of school and you don't have to do math anymore, you're
Mhm.
like, oh, I wonder. And then math helps you find out.
Yep.
Or maybe that's just me. I don't know. In any case, thanks for listening and or watching if you were watching that presentation. And we hope to see you again very soon for some more fun stuff. We always do things that no one ever asked for and that no one ever would ask except for us. But you know what? That's why we're here. And for the record, people did ask for this. So
Yes, we had at least like 2 people ask for this.
at least
Nice.
more than 2 people. So
Wow.
yeah, and yeah, I guess we'll see you again very soon for some more stuff that more than 2 people have asked for.
Yeah.
Bye.
But you
Goodbye. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening, everyone. If you enjoyed this show, then support us on Patreon for exclusive content as well as the video of us recording this. We'll have special exercises we'll be writing as well as tips and tricks with tenor drumming and other instruments to come. Subscribe to us on YouTube for some tenor tutorials and possibly other tutorials later on. And like us on Facebook at Podband Pipecast.